last year was at the COG executive committee, so they could kind of see how this played out and stuff. So just a few housekeeping items real quick. The comment log was sent out. For a while, it was sent on view only. So if you have comments that you want to make, that should be corrected now. It says comments end today. Also, on email, we'll take those through Wednesday. There's not a lot in there, but we want to give people the opportunity to make comments and tied more to the technical issues of the plans, or if there's other issues there, feel free to make those comments. And then Thursday through Monday of the end of this week, beginning of next week, if there's comments related to your city and those haven't been answered or responded to, then I'll be reaching out to you with the intent that we mail that out hard copy to some of the mayors, and that'll happen next Tuesday. So as you're looking ahead, just if you have a chance to get in there, or you want to add, trying to do that by the middle of next week with comments by responses to any comments about your projects by the end of that week would be greatly appreciated. The presentations and the next full COG meeting is on October 6th, and that'll start at 5 o'clock. With the number of applications, I'm sure everyone will need to present. Last year they waived the rural ones just there due to they could fund them all, but that'll take place. And then we're meeting with the COG executive committee later this week. So if they have any special things they want to see in your presentations, I know last year they talked about trying to get a report of where your outstanding projects, what were the status of those, things like that. You'll see an email from me out to all the mayors and the applicants for that later this week. And then again, we're here today to kind of just review the data-driven scoring. As staff, we've tried to take a good stab at reviewing the application, the plan sets, and allocating out those points. And then the kind of the policy or procedure is that it comes to this body for review. We have discussion, and then anything that changes, tweaks, we take that, and that all goes to the COG executive committee, and then that'll go to the full COG on the October 6th meeting. So
the COG executive committee, though, is the one that
kind of gives it an approval stamp and takes it to the COG,
and then it goes to the full COG.
So I only printed out a couple of these, so people might have to share if a few more. There's another set there. Part of one is someone, you only got half of it. Oh, there's another half, but trying to save some trees. By the time they were all stacked up, it was pretty thick. So we tried to save some trees. So there might be a little bit of sharing, but so, and again, we'd like to just kind of start. We'll open up for if there's questions or concerns, we can have some of that, but we'd like to just, Dallas is here. Dallas works for Wall Consultant Group. He's done the safety scoring for the last couple years. So we kind of want to let him kind of present on his scoring and what he did, and then be able to let you guys ask any questions of him and let him go. So he's not here for the whole meeting or talk about other things that are maybe applicable to Dallas. Again, a little bit, I think Dallas can kind of highlight some of the differences that we did have this year. Dallas did come up for a day. We visited the site that he was doing safety analysis on to try to get him boots on the ground, trying to see those operations, see how things were going at those sites. So we tried to add that after some of the feedback that we got last time. And then some of the other ones are kind of just how he did those analysis and some of those comparisons. But Dallas, as you kind of present all that you kind of talk on some of those and those more technical pieces. Do you want me to pull up your report? Do you want to share your screen? I don't know what you would like, Dallas.
I can share my screen or whatever. Do you guys I hope all of you have had an opportunity to see this memo before today. I would love to hear your input. I'd love to hear your questions. What I think the biggest, we made some changes. We made quite a few changes in the methodology that I used from last year, and that stemmed from a lot of concerns that you guys made last year.
Hey, Del, can you zoom in on that a little, maybe?
Yeah. Why isn't that updating? Let's try this different. Okay. There. So the first half is just a memo that kind of gives the explanation of the changes in the scoring. Like I said, there were several concerns made last year that we tried to address in a different manner this year. One of them was, of course, me not being familiar with each location, and so I did come up and I spent the day up there with Jeff and Jesse, and we drove to each site and we took some pictures and we talked about what we saw and recorded those in the notes. The second thing is there was a concern last year that some of the existing intersections had more crashes than were being predicted, significantly higher number of crashes. And they're like, how do you account for an intersection that is less safe just by nature than the highway safety manual would predict? And so this year, what we did is we calculated from the highway safety manual what's called the expected crashes. And all that does is we took the 5-year crash history of each location and we weighted it based on the methodology that they outline in the highway safety manual with the predicted crashes with the observed crashes, so that we could account for those sites that were having an elevated number of crashes compared to what the predictive models predicted. Now, at the same time, there are some locations where the sites had less crashes than were predicted, and that same weighting procedure is used to calculate the expected crashes, which is always weighted so that it comes out somewhere in between the observed and the predicted. So we did that, and then the next thing we did is there was a concern last year that perhaps I wasn't considering the change in severity at different locations for different crash types. And so this year, what we did is we calculated everything out to the number of crashes. Then we used the statewide severity distribution numbers that are published at UDOT for state routes. And we made the assumption that the severity distributions would be similar on your local roads and intersections. And so what that does is that balances out any typical severity distribution differences. There was some concerns last year that I made the point, and I still believe it, but I made the point that traffic signals increase the number of crashes, and the resultant discussion was yes, but they lower the severity of the crashes, and the reality is they lower the proportion of the severity crashes, but oftentimes that's not enough to make up the difference in the number of crashes that have increased. And so what this does by weighting the severity distribution for all of the intersection types and all the roadway types, what it does is it helps come out with a dollar value. So we boiled all of the crash numbers to a dollar value. Last year, we ranked completely on the number of crashes reduced, but this year we ranked based on the dollar value of the crashes reduced. So that would account for any severity distribution changes. Those were the main differences we did in the analysis process to kind of address some of those concerns. The next thing, same as in the past, I did not analyze any locations that were doing either maintenance projects with resurfacing the roadway. I did not do any analysis on new roadway projects because I'm basically comparing what the observed or the existing number of crashes versus what's going to happen if they make the changes proposed, right? And if I'm doing the existing number of crashes on an empty field, then it's 0, and then it always shows a negative number for any roadway that you're building, regardless of how safe you try to make it. So we just don't do an analysis on roadways that are new roadways that are proposed. Of that, I've listed the rankings of the projects the 10 projects or the 10 applications that I analyzed. And I pointed out how many crashes are avoided each year on average, the estimated number of crashes. If it's a negative number, that suggests that what you're proposing in your applications, the crashes will go up. And then, of course, I calculated the safety benefit, which is the out of the crashes avoided based on the severity distributions and the crash costs from 2025, what the annual average crash cost benefit is. So by reducing those crashes, you saved, a safety benefit of this much. And then what I did was to do the ranking, I just took the top one and the bottom one. I gave the top one 6, I gave the bottom one 1, and then everything else is kind of linearly distributed based on the safety benefit that was calculated. Okay, so, and from that, I have the safety points in the column there in comments. And then of course, I gave more description of my assumptions, the things that I saw on site, the things that I saw were going to change in the plans are also listed in an appendix section. So is there any questions as to how, anything that I've explained on my methodology? I'm using this standard methodology from the Highway Safety Manual, and it's the first edition. It came out in 2010. They're going to come out with a second edition, hopefully by the end of the year, but it's just going to augment what the first edition did. And so you're more than welcome to get a copy of the Highway Safety Manual and go through and kind of see the methodologies they use to try to predict these crashes. But it's not as, what they do is they develop what's called a safety performance function, which is, just an equation of a line in a chart, of this is how many this is the volume of vehicles, and with that volume of vehicles, you're going to get that many crashes. And then they adjust that with what they call crash modification factors for specific sites. For specific site attributes. So I have to look at each of your sites, and I have to list the kind of attributes that they're looking at that modify that number. And then I applied the calibration numbers that the state's currently using for their facilities, and I used the crash history that was observed. And in some cases, there were no crashes in the last 5 years. And so the predicted number of crashes was adjusted down according to that weighting methodology that they recommend in the Highway Safety Manual. So
you go through some of those characteristics of those intersections that would play into that. What are some of those factors?
Yeah, so like I think a good example, one that applied to a lot of the applications, was when you're at a 3 or a 4-way stop controlled intersection, if you have a right hand or a left hand turn lane dedicated to the major roadway, that's considered a safety improvement. So in some of the applications where you're widening the roadway and adding in a 2-way left turn lane where there wasn't one before, that automatically not only changes the roadway characteristics of having a 2-way left turn lane in it, but it also provides that left-hand turn lane at each of the intersections, which is another safety benefit that's added. The primary variable in predicting crashes is volume of vehicles, right? So that's the first thing. The second thing is, the existence of left and right turn lanes at an intersection. If it's a signal controlled intersection, they consider the number of left and right hand turn lanes provided on each leg. They also consider the phasing of each leg. And then they also have inputs for red light running cameras and things like that. But in Utah, those aren't practical, and so we don't use them there. Let me think. Is there any
speed a factor by chance?
So speed is not a factor in the equations. And the only time, the second version of the Highway Safety Manual and what the state has calibrated for speed is in the second version of the Highway Safety Manual that's coming out, Approach speeds on intersections that are above 50 miles an hour are flagged. Okay, and they have a different severity distribution function. They have a different algorithm to calculate the number of crashes. But that's really the only difference on these roadways, and that is concerning by most researchers. Admit that that's probably one of the biggest problems. The problem is trying to develop studies that nail down the impact of speed on safety and crash frequency is really quite difficult. And so they haven't done a lot in the highway safety manual other than they wrote a section about speed and they gave some ideas about how speed is handled, but they didn't include them in the actual algorithms.
I would wager to say that that's probably the biggest difference between a local municipal roadway and a UDOT style roadway is the speed differential. Number and volume of traffic. Those are the two big differences.
Yeah.
Not saying one way or another. I'm just trying to understand.
Yeah.
I can't remember if we had that conversation with Dallas or me and Jeff had that conversation. Again, a lot of the projects that have had signals, or you start to look at the other ones that like North Logan has or Logan has, they're not on most places 55-mile-per-hour roads. They are on those 35, maybe 40s and stuff. So again, it's like Dallas kind of said, that's not a number in the equation. And safety is all, since we've started safety, it's always been a hard one to score. Because again, there's not studies or calibrations for every single scenario and factor. So
yeah,
it's a resource balance too. I mean, we do the best with the, I don't want to call it quick and dirty, but we don't really have the capacity, both money wise and time wise, to do a PhD dissertation on each project. And honestly, probably to do it right, you would, in some cases, need more than that. And I'll give the example of a signal. So it's a tough sell when you tell members of the public or anyone. I struggle with it too, of, hey, a signal is going to make it less safe, because we all, we're familiar with signalizing and we're thinking, oh yeah, that's, and there are oftentimes things like the operational benefit that we see that's not necessarily a safety factor, but also there's things like, so I go to Lowe's quite often on 14th North, and you would think turning left out of Lowe's on 14th North at peak hour would be a bad thing to do. And in some cases it is. But the reality is you get pretty good gaps from the second east signal and the fourth east signal that you can actually make a pretty safe left-hand turn there. And I actually kind of, even though I'd have options of going a different route, I'm not that afraid to do that, because, so those are things that these adjacent signals gave a benefit upstream or downstream that is probably got a safety correlation, or may well have, but it would never be captured in a signal analysis. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because it's not robust enough to consider it. It's kind of just looking at that intersection. So these things, I think, can get complicated. We're not suggesting that this is the end-all exhaustive safety analysis on every project. It's kind of applying the tools in the highway safety manual. I think we have pretty high confidence that Dallas knows what he's doing with that. And the fairness aspect of is that Dallas doesn't have a dog in the fight one way or the other. So it's kind of a balancing of resources and how do we do this. And not perfect, but I think it's about as good as we can do at this point.
You have that same confidence northbound on Main Street, turning left onto 10th?
No.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah, you'll never make it through that one. I had a question, not that it changes the outcome of this, but how did you approach the railroad crossing on 400 North? on that.
That's a good question. Frankly, I did not approach the railroad crossing there. I saw in the application that you're removing one railroad crossing, that you have protected turn phasing or permissive protected turn phasing at that intersection. I considered that, but I did not consider the removal of the railway crossing at the other location. We could go to the state and we could ask them for crash data statewide. There is no predictive models for doing crashes with trains at specific locations. And usually what the highway safety manual does is they just say, well, in the state of Utah, there were this many crossings with, in these conditions, and they had this many crashes. So on average, it was this, right? It's very, very high level. And so I did not consider that.
And I think,
I appreciate that. I was just curious what that approach would have been.
and the other,
Because they are eliminating one.
Yeah.
As part of the project, so that could.
and part of what the new one is, we kind of said, hey, on 600 West, they have some widening, but where we don't really do a new project, kind of past the edge of that old road wasn't considered, that new connection, that crossing wasn't considered as part of those new projects, those new roadway segments. So Logan's had enough where it had the new segment, but there was a lot going on 600 West. So he calculated just those improvements due to 600 West, but kind of didn't look at what impacts of that new road would be.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but we still just get one train a day and it goes about 20 miles an hour.
It's two times
Two times a
on
week.
Tuesday and Thursday. I think
So
it's
it's less than
8:30
that.
and 1:30. I used to know it, but
It's pretty light.
So something else I didn't bring up. So I talked about intersections. Variables on roadways include things like, well, both intersections and roadways include lighting, the existence of lighting at those locations. Roadways also, they look at, whether there's the existence of a two-way left turn lane. They look at the number of lanes present. They look at the number of driveways and the types of driveways that are along the roadway. And they look at, what else do they have? And then of course, just the length of the overall roadway, because all the equations for segments are calculated as crashes per mile. And so, if it's a half a mile, then it's half of the predicted value. Oh, and then they do, for rural roadways, they do offset to hazard. Actually, both of them they just do it differently. The rural roadways does something called a road hazard rating, roadside hazard rating, that's outlined and defined in the highway safety manual. And then the urban ones is the density of fixed objects to the roadway and the average distance to those fixed objects. And so in some cases it's difficult, because if you have a roadway that you're widening, you're adding a two-way left turn lane in, and you're going to, put in the shoulders and sidewalks, but the power poles aren't moving anywhere, then really that offset to hazard never, what happens is when you widen the roadway, it pushes that travel lane closer to the hazard. And so what happens is it actually works, the two-way left turn lane works in your behalf, but the closeness to the hazard works against you. That makes sense?
No questions?
Okay. If there's no questions, or if you do think of something, again, we can try to provide you answers or stuff, but that wraps that up. Then again, Dallas, we appreciate your time and looking at our projects again this year. And again, we try to make some tweaks to try to represent them the best that we can. And again, Dallas came up and we spent a day and we went and visited them. So grateful for Dallas's time and willingness to work with us on this process every year. So if there's nothing else for safety, we'll let you go.
Okay.
So,
Make sure you read through the appendices, and if I've made any glaring errors about your intention of your application, please let me know. Okay?
But quickly,
yeah.
because we're gonna start pushing this out to probably be good.
Okay, maybe not. Don't read the appendix. Anyway,
Well, no,
If you
no.
see something in there that you feel is Dallas has sent them to us and we've kind of reviewed it, we've said, hey, we see this in the plans and we've done a little bit to make sure that we try to represent the best of them. But if you guys have seen things in your projects or someone else's project that you don't feel is correctly represented, then again, we're trying to give people the best. We want to give people the score they deserve. So if you do, again, we'd probably look for those comments in the next day or two as we are closing on that October 6th window and trying to get this to the COG executive committee and out. We have a number of mayors that get a hard copy mailing, so that takes time to go through that process. So I think some days lately we've been sending stuff and it's taken 7 days just to get to across town. So
Thanks, Dallas.
thanks for letting me do this, guys. This was a lot of fun. I appreciate it. We'll talk to you later.
thank you. Okay, no, I guess the other, I don't know if we just want to open it up to questions, comments on the rest of the scoring. Weston did bring up that on Richmond's for volume, it says 1, it should be 2. That matches the scoring on the back sheet for their project. So
that was just a typo.
that was just when the equations pulled it in, it's referencing the wrong cell. So I thought I went through and checked all those, but it appears I missed that one or thought I had corrected it. So
some of these are judgment calls on the part of staff, trying to apply, because our job is simply to apply the approved scoring to the applications. And, so generally it's pretty clear, but sometimes there's some ambiguity. And so that's why we call this draft. And so us doing our job is making a scoring assessment, and eventually we'll take it to the COG executive committee. But if you want to raise issues of, this should be looked at this way for this scoring item, we will convey that to the COG executive committee. How to say, and I don't know if I have examples of this, but there's some that, we kind of had to make a judgment call, but we fully intended kind of raise the issue with the COG executive committee where our judgment calls are more squishy. Does that make sense?
I'll call on mine. I don't know whether you want to, each one of us talk about our own or talk about others. Or
No, we'd like
we can,
each of you to talk about it.
I'm a bike lane. I believe we put in a bike lane, as number 5 says, bike lane, not bike lanes. So I realized that Jesse is interpreted it as bike lane, but 5 says bike lane. And I argue that bike lane is active transportation. We have a sidewalk, which I realize doesn't count in your side, but for feasibility and usability of the section, for us to be able to have a sidewalk on one side and active transportation bike lane on the other achieves active transportation in the element that was intended. So I'm arguing that that's what was intended and that's what we achieved.
yeah. So
Anyway, is that what you're looking for? Because that's
Yeah.
our-
yeah. So again, what I would say to give a little bit of, when most of this is black, but where we kind of put yellow box or there's red text, that's kind of where, again, some of these questions show up in the applications. We try to give people an opportunity to say, hey, if you have some of these, let's just have you put that information there to do it. So again, Ryan brings up the fair point, and again, then we've had a few emails back and forth, but hey, we met, and a lot of these notes, the 1 through 6 came from when we changed the scoring system a number of years ago, and we met and we discussed and stuff. So again, we kind of say, hey, if you have a regular sidewalk, we don't want that to be, that doesn't really count as active transportation. We want that larger shared use path and bike lane. Again, it does say bike lane, And not regularly, in my opinion, do we see just bike lane in one direction, but I guess that was part of some conversation here. And again, we're not the final sayer, so again, this will go up the chain, but
Anyway, that's our argument. If that's what you're looking for, that's my argument for this.
Yeah, discussion,
for that
yeah.
Specific one that I'd say, hey, you know, it's achieving the active transportation. You know, we're widening it to the point, we have a river on the side. It's unfeasible. We've tried to take the perspective of saying, well, it's unfeasible to go and pipe the entire river. It's kind of, so we took an approach of saying, well, we'd like to have a bike lane on both sides, but we chose to utilize both the sidewalk on one and a bike lane on the other. I think that achieves what active transportation is intended. So that's my argument. So that's what you're looking for. Argument so made.
okay.
Question on projects 8, 9, phasing.
I guess can we come back
Oh,
I guess- or just some some discussion?
Anybody else disagree?
Does this
with
body
me?
feel that hey, having the bike lane on one side kind of still meets that intent? Hey, they're providing that. Just again, we're just trying to fill out what people think.
I kind of support that. I'm not sure which side of the street the plans have the bike lane on, but there's a lot of places where directional traffic for bikes is not the same one way as is the other way, just because of, you know, we like the easier route or whatever. Sometimes it's easier to take a route one direction than it is to come back the other way. So I don't know exactly that's the situation here, but I think that you certainly want to consider that. And so again, I would also agree with Ryan, if you're doing what you can within realistic abilities of, or efficient, use of dollars, it doesn't make sense to say you have to have 2 bike lanes if it's 4 times the cost to get a bike lane on one side or whatever.
Okay, no.
I agree with that.
Again, this is trying to facilitate some conversation, have opinions. If everyone else was like on a different topic, there's no way we 100% oppose that, then hey, we probably know that, or hey, generally that was people were in acceptance of that. That's kind of would help the COG executive committee as they kind of make some of those final decisions. So
We're making this video available to them too, so they'll be able to, assuming they have the appetite to go watch it. So they could benefit from this conversation too.
okay, no, I guess there's nothing else on that
So
one.
we will advance that, Ryan.
I had a question on projects 8, 9,
Okay,
just phasing.
8, 9, are you talking 8, 9,
Hyde Park
ranking list or 8, 9?
project number.
the project number 1. Those are the 2 Hyde Park ones for that Wolfpack Way segment.
I mean, this could change things, but phasing, that Wolfpack, I've been hearing about that forever. Or Hogan's done a portion of it. Is it not, are we just saying phasing within a certain jurisdiction? Are we able to count that as phasing throughout the region?
And that's,
And I asked that about the Hyde Park ones, and I see North Logan took the points for phasing for the 200 East. So it almost makes sense, but
okay, and I guess that's another one where we tried to, North Logan got those phasing points because they've had a right of way funding on that road. And they've also had a partial funding last year. So they did get some of those points. There was,
Criteria does tie it the last 2 years.
oh, that's okay.
yeah, we did have
Because
that.
just even in the way they presented it is almost phasing.
We kind of
Almost.
struggled with that though.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Just throwing the question out there, right?
and last year, like the 2 years wasn't in there and some other things, and we kind of said, hey, if a project had kind of already said, hey, they came in and said, hey, here's what we see as the next, this is phase 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we kind of held to that one this year. And there was, when we kind of were bouncing ideas off each other, is, hey, if they've been doing the Second East Corridor, and hey, if Hyde Park's doing a project over here, and Providence comes in on the same corridor all the way down here, is that really a phase project? Or does there need to be some way that they're kind of either, hey, these coming together to work, or hey, we're going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I guess that's
Our recollection of the motive for that criteria. I tried to go back to the video of COG meetings where it was discussed. Didn't get a lot of enlightenment. But our recollection was it's really to take projects that, you know, oftentimes your Italy one is an example where you artificially split it up into multiple phases because you kind of had to. The idea is that the COG is already kind of committed. Now they do that naturally through their own scoring that they funded a phase off of the next phase. But that's just to juice that project, say, okay, we've already committed to this, seeing it through makes sense. So we give a little juice to that project. But the struggle is, you know, where do you draw that line? And we're probably going to need to get better clarification for next go round of what that is. And the reason I say that is, you know, the most broad interpretation of this would be Logan 20 years ago, before the COG even existed, bought the scout office and punched through 2nd East to 3rd South. No one was even, some of you may have been around, but the COG wasn't around. You know, that was done. That's on Wolfpack Way. You know, should a project in Smithfield get phasing points for that? You know, where is that line? Is there anything done anywhere on the corridor? Is it with COG money?
Yeah.
And so that's the hard part, is where do you draw that line?
Exactly. That's why I brought the question up, because this does tie into the North Logan.
Yeah.
It's so I don't know. It's a
We have
tough
to be
tough
consistent,
sell.
which I think we are. This last go around, we kind of said, no, it's, you know, momentum. This is a momentum kind of thing, not a, if that makes sense.
I get it. I was just going.
So we're open to opinion though, because we're gonna discuss that same thing with the COG executive. I think we highlighted it as yellow.
no, those ones didn't, but that was one that we played with, and we have
So the way I see this plan
different.
playing out is either let's see, part A and B ranked equally high. If one doesn't get funded for some political reason, that only one gets funded, so that next one now gets those 5 points if they apply to the next,
Yes.
within the next 2 funding cycles, correct?
That's the intent behind that.
That
Hey,
makes
if
sense.
they're, and I think their application might even have talked a little bit. Again, is that you need that next phase to make that final connection in Smithfield as well. I think that talks about in their purchasing statements and those type of things. So
The follow-up to Tom's question is that if you have 2 applications like this that are phased,
they didn't say it
Yeah.
get phase points.
They
this
only
year.
get phase points if one of them gets.
if you come back next year and get the phase, just ask.
Yes, they'd come back next year if they said, hey,
No, I understand that, but right now, the way it reads is, we got
phase
phase
points
points
this
for
year.
both of them if they were both funded. Does that make sense? That's not a phase project.
The ranking right now is.
So if
based on
your
phase.
ranking right now shows them as both phase projects.
does it show them both this?
No, they got.
No, it does. I was like,
They got 0 points.
They got 0.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying, but yes. Right, so next year they will get paid.
yes, if one of them came in, if one of them got funded this year and the next one came in, it's kind of like,
Yeah.
they have a nexus, or hey, I think maybe sometimes that is multi-jurisdictional, because 2 or 3 cities come and say, hey, there's this small corridor between all 3 of us that we're trying to work on, but
I think it got, what I read to is Jesse. What your question was, if you actually comment on us.
And regarding those 2 projects, one other question completely outside the realm of the CTEC, what we're going over right now, or the jurisdictional review, however we want to call this, is going to be regarding the questions that were already brought up regarding North Logan projects and Hyde Park projects that are on there, during 200 East or Wolfpack Way or Bobcat Way or whatever you want to call it. As it goes through there is the 107 million that UDOT has in funding. And that's a question for the executive committee that they're going to have to go over and say, are there funds, or should we be seeking funds to go towards this? Because these funds, these roads will have 10,000 vehicles per day should these funds be going towards that to alleviate a failing Main Street or a failing Highway 91 all the way through this corridor of Smithfield? And so that's a question for them at that point.
Well, another point is UDOT draft, they're doing their master trails plan for the state, right? The draft version right now only shows one trail in the entire valley, and it's the one that goes along Wolfpack Way. So that's not published yet, but is that another funding source we could potentially look at for any projects along the corridor for the active transportation side?
Well, I think, the answer to that is yes and yes. The challenge is, we did we did a pretty good squeeze, and it's not done on UDOT to say, hey, come up with more money and fund that 200 East. There was a circle back meeting that included, all the, jurisdictions in Center Wilton, and so that and if UDOT comes through and funds all of that, great. I think what we may have to do is just bring that up with the COG of saying, right now the answer is no. They've said no, we don't have the capacity to fund that, at least in the short term. That doesn't mean the fight is over or it's a done deal. Everyone has kind of said, the projects that they already committed to on the Y intersection and the punch through Second East, they don't want to jeopardize that funding or yank from, at least in concept. That's what's been said. So the question is, what is a COG deal with Mayor Peterson emailed UDOT region director and said, hey, we're meeting as a COG. In other words, we kind of need an answer. And the answer was no. We don't have the ability to fund it. He didn't really say beyond that. He just said, talk to Jeff and go find federal funds, which is great. So and we can talk about that, but
As far as River
that's kind
Heights
of a
City is
broad.
concerned, as far as River Heights is concerned, they can have the money. to do it.
Right, so there's all that, and that might play out over time
They
where
can
that
take it and use it
project
up north.
becomes less viable or whatever, and that may be a discussion for another day. But I think right now we're left, what do we do with it? And I think what I would suggest to the COG is maybe they could build a contingency in their approval. We can only submit one approval to UDOT any given year.
To the county
To
council.
the county council. But there's nothing saying we couldn't, as part of that approval, say, if UDOT money comes through or other money drops from heaven or whatever, then this is what happens. And we fund deeper on the list or whatever. They can do a kind of a contingency approval. And honestly, I think that's about the only way we can deal with it with uncertainty. I don't know how else to do it. Because North Logan's not gonna want, they're gonna want, in the absence of UDOT stepping up and committing to it, they're gonna need to move forward with COG, which is understandable. And I don't think we want to hold it in limbo waiting for UDOT.
So the other thing I would ask on the North Logan 200 East, like in the safety analysis, he said assume no changes at the 1400 North and Second East intersection. I believe we're adding a right-hand turn lane. So I think there's something that was missed on that analysis. I don't know that it'll change anything, but it might be worth having Dallas relook at that.
Real quick on that one, just so I can,
So I'm on
You're still going back to
number
safety.
7.
we've gone past this, Tom. No, just kidding. Though, are you
Well,
talking?
because they didn't get any safety points, so on 7, item number 6C, I just caught that one out. Sorry. Assume no changes on 14th North 200 East.
And you are correct, though.
You're adding a right turn lane from Second East to 1400 North.
Yes.
Correct.
In both directions. The north
That
and
might
south.
change something, but
Well, and I can, we can raise that to Dallas to look. I know there was some point.
sorry, we're going backwards, that's fine.
Okay, and I know on there as well, like under number 4, he kind of says, hey, he knew on the south side in front of Culver's, there's a little bit of widening, and you guys say, hey, that's pretty minimal and wouldn't really result in a score change. But if we do want to push him to go back and look at that.
It's
Okay.
pretty significant.
Okay. We can, Dallas, when we've had little tweaks for him to go back and look at before, just based on our reviews, he's been able to quick turn those fairly quickly, so we can raise that. Okay, no, we can,
Okay, we can move forward now.
So I'll pick River Heights one. If there, I think the whole idea of it is probably part of the widening. I realize that maybe not a new road, but they proposed a full lane and give us no points. Is that the proposal?
so on River Heights, they do have widening, but there was some just issues with, I don't know if you want to speak to it or want me to speak.
I'll speak to it. So.
So maybe if you're okay with the points, but I think, I'm hoping they're widening more than 4
No,
feet.
it's widening by substantially.
I hope.
Taking it from 2 10-foot lanes to 2 12-foot lanes with 6-foot paved shoulders. Basically what we're looking at there. So, I don't think it's quite 6 foot, it's like a 4-foot paved shoulder.
You might be
6 plus the gutter, that's the 4 plus the gutter, would be, that's what 6 to curb the curb. But the question I have relating to that is, well, the reason why it's noted here, not the points for widening, is because you know, on the south side of the road, outside the right of way is Providence. River Heights City has from the south right of way line north, but the 10th East intersection is a county road. And River Heights, in order to include the intersection, you have to have a public hearing at the county council, and that wasn't scheduled at the county level to include the public hearing. So River Heights said, you know what, that's the intersection's in the county anyway. So River Heights, as far as the River Heights City is concerned, we can only control what we can control. So we stopped the project at the Cache County River Heights City boundary and put the improvements what we could in the city there. You know, there's a situation where you know, the Visionary Homes, who controls the development on the south in Providence there, put a curb return in that matches the existing pavement instead of a future widening. Usually, you know, what you would like to see, and there's a lot of reasons why it probably didn't happen. River Heights partly involved. We didn't go to Providence or the developer or the county where it should have been and say, hey, when this all happens, this is what River Heights wants to build and match up their future road. We didn't say that. Providence, the county, it just happened. They installed a curb return that matches the existing 20-foot wide pavement section there on the south side. The north side already has curb and gutter and is paved to the north curb there. And so the intersection improvements would be to readjust or relocate, remove and replace to the widened street section. But again, the reason it's not included is it's in the county. The question here is, would River Heights City pay for all of that or commit to funding for the intersection improvements? I'm not the mayor and the council, I can't speak to that, but it's outside their jurisdiction. And we all know the county's got deep pockets right now. And so I don't know what the financial situation looks like there, but certainly would like to include, you know, those points. Right now there's a taper because you're tapering down from wider street to a narrow street as you come to the intersection. So there's also I think an electrical box that's in that would be in that taper if we continue that section all the way through. It would have to be adjusted or relocated, but we could basically put the asphalt width clear to the jurisdiction line and then just put a painted taper, but we still have to manage the intersection. So I don't know the best solution for that. My question is a little bit deeper on that is your ranking and scoring between basically COG project or few years ago, you added in spot improvement projects. And it was noted previously, Jesse, that, this doesn't qualify as a COG project because, 6 South is not on, CMPO plan as a project. Well, the reason it hasn't been is until the visionary homes went through, there wasn't a 66-foot wide right of way. You only let projects on your list if it's a 66-foot right of way. And until the property in Providence was developed and they dedicated the right of way for River Heights City, then, that's, when we got the actual width to qualify as a project, and hadn't been added on to that COG funding list yet. So therefore it's a spot improvement project, but it's still, from what I'm seeing, it's still evaluating the range based on all of the same criteria as your primary projects. And so to me, that why have a scenario or a condition where you say, we'll consider spot improvement projects, but it's ranked against Wolfpack Way, and that type of thing, 6th West and Logan and whatnot. It's like, I know there's a rural set aside, and I don't know that there should be an argument for a spot improvement set aside, but if you have a category for spot improvements, it's never going to rank with any of these other primary COG projects.
Yeah, there was a lot there.
All that,
All that.
I'm arguing for the 3 points, which will make probably no
No
difference.
difference in the
in
it's not
scoring,
changing anything,
but I think they're widening more than the amount in technicality. I realize that they have a little piece that's not in the jurisdiction that they really should commit to do, but the project does fit that it is a widening, and that was what the criteria was.
Yeah, and again, this was one that kind of came with the COG executive committee at the very front when we kind of looked at those applications and stuff, just due to, hey, yeah, great, we're getting that, but
It was part of their eligibility review. Should all projects move
if we're looking at a spot where, hey, that's great, but we still have this big pinch point there. There was a little bit of concern with that, and hey, is there some willingness? Is there a way that could be resolved in another way, and then kind of let it keep going with, let's have some of these discussions as the process continues.
So it's a technicality, but from staff's perspective, when we evaluate it, there's a choke point. And so that makes it so we can't give those points. Now, if someone above us, COG executive committee or whatever, or COG members in their own scoring
I'm still going to argue for the 3 points. Now I'm going to change my argument a little differently than if I can. The city road will connect the adjacent city road, not just a county road, but adjacent city road will connect to that road as a connection. If it's not done, that will not connect. So it's not.
Why would the subdivision not build that road?
They would have, but I can give you that.
Yeah,
I can give you that answer.
I didn't see that in the right.
I can give you that answer. The province said, hey, we want you to build it. We show the desire that they build it. We required a Providence City road to butt up against the edge of this Providence City street that comes through that subdivision. That's a Providence City street that tees up to it. But their mayor decided that they wanted more than just the pavement. They wanted the full width done by the developer. And the developer at that point was willing to do some, and then felt like there was a straw that broke the camel's back, and they backed off and did not. And they said, well, if you're going to ask us for everything, we're going to do nothing.
And the ask was from River Heights mayor or
Yes.
from Providence?
No, the ask was from the River Heights
Couldn't
mayor.
Providence have required it though as part of their?
We couldn't because it was outside of
It's
our
outside their
jurisdiction.
jurisdiction.
It's not within our, we tried, but it's outside of our jurisdiction. And debating facts, and I don't want to debate facts, but my understanding was the 66 was there. They didn't have a dedication, but regardless of the point of some of that piece of why or whatever, I don't mean to argue depth in somebody else's project. But I do think that this is a connection between communities, and the benefit of that communication. Most of these other ones you look, they're not connecting communities together. I mean, when we have just this Lewiston, Newton, River Heights is smack in between Logan and Providence. They are a connection between there. So they're widening the road. I would have even argued that filling a gap is maybe a stretch, but there will be a road. There will be a road that this does connect and finish the T. Without it, it will be a dead end road. From Providence, it'll be a dead end road, but with the project, it will be a connected.
I don't think that's the case. River Heights is not planning on connecting the Providence Street, but.
We're gonna
that's
remove the
direction
connection
I
when that
think
road
we
is
should
paved.
go.
So we're gonna connect
So-
this.
Are you talking about the road that's currently kind of in there with the
Yes.
barricades across the
Yeah,
concrete
subdivision,
across it?
and I visited with River Heights. My understanding is that that was part of it, that they would connect, and that was widening. That's why we support the project.
Okay, well, that's
We
not
support the
what my
project.
understanding. Ryan is correct. There wasn't Mayor Wright, it was previous mayor, but, you know,
I think he went, I think
with that.
he overplayed his hand, and that broke the camel's back, and that's why the developer didn't.
But
Otherwise, they would have done their proportionate share. But if the ask got too big.
I mean, we find, even though it's by a technicality, and I don't think anyone questions the worthiness of the project. Challenge is just when we reviewed it with the executive committee of, do we want to build a substandard choke point in the road? And is there a way to fix that? And that's gonna be the question. And is the COG willing to fund it with a choke down?
At this point, I don't think.
And I think-
It's just.
and again, to answer some of those other questions that-
I just think on principle, if that were my project, it really does do more than what the points are.
And the points, and it is hard because again, the points aren't, we do the best we can with the points and then the mayors have that. If we reflect back to last year and we did the ranking and we met again to finalize that proposal, I think North Logan had a partial funding on one of theirs and they said, you know what? We'll give up the partial and we'll come back next year. And in that place, we proposed funding Millville, Providence, and I can't remember if there was another one, but there were a few of those small jurisdictions that were in for the $150,000, $200,000, $400,000 that they did get funded. So I think there's, in the past, there's tried to be COG has tried to make sure everyone gets a bite of the apple, but it has been recognized that the River Heights, the Millville, some of those small cities have always just, unfortunately, they've scored lower, not to say that they're not good projects.
They're still in an urban area, so
And that's
where
where,
to Craig's point, they're subject to that set aside approval
Yeah, but I think for 3 points,
for the.
it's not gonna.
You're right, Ryan.
Add
Thank
to
you.
any
I think.
project, it was just.
Thank you for arguing for River Heights, but again, you're right, 3 points doesn't make a difference, but I do agree with you on the connectivity. I mean, you look at that, it's like, yeah, it's, you know, the ADT is substantially lower than, you know, projects between Smithfield and coming down through Hyde Park and North Logan or whatever, but it's still a connector road that's taking traffic from Logan City, from Providence City. There's a tiny little bit of Cache County in there and River Heights City that are all, and people from Millville drive through there and come through there as well. So, you know, it's interconnecting multiple communities that are using that road. It's not just River Heights City traffic by any means. But, you know, just looking at that and also, I mean, you know, as far as phasing, well, would we get more points if we say, you know what, you know, we're gonna phase the project, we'll list it on the CMPO, so it's a standard project, and then we can say we're gonna phase it and do half of it one year and half of it the next year and get the phasing points and things for it. And
You can go on our phase, we're on that road, you can be phase two.
yeah, we'll be phase two as you connect and make the improvements on the south end, all of that.
So one point I can raise is, is there some pathway to a fix? To fixing that choke point. And,
Oh, I'm sure there is, but like Ryan
But
said,
it's
is it gonna
money.
make a difference?
but
I don't know.
well, I guess what I'm saying is not only point issue. There's gonna be some heartache on the part of some COG members, because it was expressed to the COG committee of even funding something that has a substandard choke. Does that make sense? And so,
Absolutely.
so in your presentation, if that could be offered of, hey, you had to do this out of technicality, public hearings weren't scheduled right, whatever, we can include that. I don't know that 400,000 is gonna, pay for it anyway.
It's not gonna
You're
come close to it. No.
Yeah, so you're having to put city funds somehow into it, somehow. Other funds are gonna have to come in. And so the question would be whether some solution could be said, no, you had it on the plans, choke it down because of the public hearing issue, but we worked out that we're gonna fix it as part of the project. Does that make sense? And that might give the COG members, I don't know how much they're gonna have concern about it, but Mayor Hidalgo said, that he wants it brought up with the full COG. And, this is, at least in his view, unacceptable to choke down, even though it's only a small deal. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
I think it's just kind of.
3 points for you.
So, and again, part of that comes when we score these, and again, if there's that little bit at the end, in some cities, like it's not worth it, probably a $4 million ask to take 400,000 and sit on that for a year or two. Hey, sometimes they'll push those down to those other cities, and we'll just come back next year and ask again. So
This does speak to making sure you, and I know it's hard to do, but make sure you assess. And this came about through blood, sweat, and tears, and through problems with other projects where the county council insisted to have a public hearing if there's a multi-jurisdictional project. Has to be a public hearing in every one of them. So, be mindful of that, because sometimes, like with the county, they take a month to schedule it and get it in, and really the lead jurisdiction has to kind of bird dog that through. So, does that make sense? You got to watch that. We try to emphasize it in our how to apply meeting. Send out emails saying if there's a multi-jurisdictional project, make sure you get with the other jurisdiction. I don't know what else we could do.
sure.
I'm ready to move on to another project. I had a question. Trenton, when I was looking at that project, and granted, I'm only on GIS, it looks like there's some right of way that wasn't included in any of the cost estimates. I'm wondering, did anyone look at that? I didn't get into the plats or anything, the county plats. But
Yeah, I know.
it almost appears that we're gonna be building private roads with funds, but
And I think, and I know I had a little bit of conversation with their engineer a little while ago on some of the right of way through there. And I think some of that is that as you get out into those smaller communities and different places in the county, the right of way is a hard one. And I think that there's some there that they have a right by use, they have a prescriptive easement for some
not
road.
to widen.
And again, part of that would be, are they widening outside of that? I think that is a fair point.
Yeah, so I thought. the
And
same
there's
thing.
some- and there's-
prescriptive easements.
And there's somewhere,
There was quite
is
a
it
bit.
built in this time frame under these laws at this time but I think we could raise some of those questions back to Trenton.
That's
to see if
something
they
that
could.
staff is gonna be looking at.
I'll put that on my list to do a little round back with Trenton on some of that, and that was brutal. So.
I mean, it ranks really high, but I just don't know that their cost estimate is accurate, is why I bring it up, because they didn't include anything in their cost estimate for right of way.
Good.
Well, one other thing to bring up is, kind of a timing issue with Hyde Park. You know, they have 2 phases and it is out of necessity to break it up because of the cost function, but we struggled a bit. You know, one is Part B, which is 30, well,
Or at least
not 37 north, but
400 north and Hyde Park to 4,400 north.
and then Part B is,
Or that is part, you go from Hyde Park Lane to 400 north and 400 north to 40 north.
so what we said is on Part B, when you look at volumes, because if you only build Part B, and this may not end up being this way because we're funding 2 years in advance, so I'm sure Hyde Park's intent would be to come back next year and try to get Part A funded. But it does create a dilemma. If only Part B is funded, it's not an entirely orphaned road, but it's not connected. There would be a gap, if that makes sense. So for getting volume points, we kind of struggle. If the COG funds A and B, then Part B would get the full volume 6 points. But if the COG only funds B,
That's fine.
then
It kind of ties into this phasing thing.
I think that's our same argument in River Heights. You know, the county needs to apply next year for a spot improvement at that intersection. And then, you know, that's what we're expecting. And so otherwise there's just a volume disparity right there as you get to the intersection. So it's the same argument. The whole thing is the same argument, just at a relative scale between
well, the
these
difference
larger and
now is
smaller
we have
projects. So,
2 actual applications in the same year.
okay.
So that makes it,
Yeah.
so now we're limited, you know, how do
Somehow
we-
the county just wasn't on board with what we were doing in River Heights. So
It was more of, yeah, timing issue more than, again, that's, yeah.
So what we've said there is, in the staff comments, and I guess we'll have to deal with this, you know, I don't know how, we'll have to figure out how to do it, but if the COG only funds Part B, this will need to be adjusted. See if the volume when it opens to traffic would still go get those points. Does that make sense? I mean, it's not that Part B doesn't have a utility, because it does connect some roads,
But it would T at the top.
but it would T, and it wouldn't be that regional north-south yet, even though eventually that's the intent. So this is just kind of a timing issue. Now, if A is funded, not a problem. If A and B are funded, it's not a problem. But if just B is funded, COG's gonna have kind of a dilemma. Do we circle back on that scoring? Because it wouldn't qualify for the same
So you,
point.
sorry.
And we used to have a process, by the way, where we looked at like future model volumes on the way. So we didn't so much care with what are the actual count likelihoods. We kind of got away from that for various reasons. So now we're kind of left to, you know, what are the actual counts? And that's what drives the points, or we do leave it open to give an analysis of anticipated counts, but you have
For
to
new
kind of,
roads.
for new roads. But anyway, that's just the dilemma, and we'll have to face it. Sorry, Tom.
No, it's funny because as you're speaking, I'm thinking, okay, should Part B get connectivity points? Without having Part A.
It got those in a sense that
It is,
it's still, it's completing the grid on what will be a significant corridor.
but without Part B, it doesn't have connectivity.
Well, it has some
You see
level.
where,
of
you see the
Yeah.
dilemma there.
Yeah, but you're still connecting those 3 or 4 blocks, but yes, it doesn't.
There's
If
some
B got funded by itself, it doesn't serve the full purpose of Wolfpack Way by itself.
But it does have connecting some gap utility in the sense that it connects with some subdivision roads. I mean, it would have some utility.
but that's not, that connecting subdivision roads isn't part of your criteria. It's regional connectivity.
Well, for the complete the grid points, that's, we, you know, we, 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 So in the urban area, all projects have to be capacity projects. And, but there's plenty of, I mean, your project's capacity project, as long as it's a collector type road. And I would argue that even Part B alone is that completed grid collector road. Now, is it regionally significant? No, not without its connection. And so that's why I think those points would be reflected as such. They might get the complete the grid 3 points on that if it goes back, but if they wouldn't get the 6 points, if only B is not.
But don't we look at the project as that one project is funded and then independent projects? Aren't all projects supposed to be independent? That's why we give points for phase, because we fund one, and the next time you need to come and you ask for the next phase, you give more credit for that, so that you don't have to bring interdependent projects at the same time. Isn't that
I think we have a
goal?
policy somewhere in the COG that just, as a catch-all, says projects should have independent utility. And then one of the rationale for that is COG doesn't want to build a project and then a new mayor comes on that says this project sucks. We're not going after that. And then all of a sudden you have the orphan project. So we have a policy that just in concept says now whether Part B would have enough independent utility in and of itself, I guess that's in the eye of the beholder, but I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah, I'm just not sure whether that's, I mean, obviously you determined that it does and you're the beholder, so, but the question comes is we do look at these, when you're scoring them, they should be individualized project, not if A and B, then B gets the point score. If A doesn't get scored, if B doesn't score on its own that way, I mean, it's still high enough. It's going to be for my project either plus or minus, so it doesn't really matter. But at that point, I'm just making sure that we do have the projects are funded based on their own individual, right? So I mean, I guess I'm.
Yeah, I don't know. Kind of, and it's not my part's kind of, because I think that your preference would be to obviously do both, but there's just, that would take all the money and keep going out. And so it's a reality, but it creates a dilemma. I mean, I think our preference would be to fund A, because that makes it simpler. And that's kind of consistent with how Italy has done things where it's kind of a progressive phasing. And then you don't have to worry so much about, you have to worry about a logical termini that each phase gets somewhere. But you don't have to worry about, hey, we're doing this or this.
That's a great example. Because we're now just finishing that final connection there. So that's a great parallel. Thank you.
And if a mayor would have bailed on it, still wouldn't have been a great project, but at least it would have had some independent utility for the phases they got there.
Great.
I don't know, that's.
And I just look at this and say, if I were, I mean, I think our committee should, or our group should be helping the scoring or the mayors. At this point, we leave them to not know that, with the scoring to be exactly the same out of this group. That doesn't tell them that A is preferred over B at all, right? I mean, at some point, how do we, other than them watching this, which whether they have time to watch it, we'll see. How do we help in those instances when we say, hey, this is preferred over that, and some scoring probably should be different coming out of us somehow? I don't know what that looks like.
So we can point out the scoring dilemma, and that if they proceed a certain way, if somehow that will have to be dealt with. But the other thing that and you're welcome in your comment log or whatever, that's kind of the intent there. But we also have the staff memo, which is kind of our independent, where we can convey things, whether they read it or care what we think, I don't know, but that would probably be somewhere where we'd say, you know, staff would recommend to fund A, to not orphan the things.
Could you possibly just show both scores, the upper score and the lower score? If there was no connectivity, you would still rank it at the upper score, but
Primarily the applicant is the one that determines out of the two projects, which one is their highest priority.
Yeah, I was gonna say, Greg, we gotta be careful with saying preferred because our preference is they both get funded, but then that leaves not a ton of money for everyone else. So really, Mayor Cox decided to split it that way. If there was gonna be a split, then we could have some money left over from others. So I like the idea of having both scores shown if we have to do it that way. But yeah, if it's the preference of the applicant, our preference is both get funded. So.
If you want to both
But if
fund it,
don't
would have
get-
been a single project too.
Right, but it
That's
was,
the other alternative of doing that too.
so if that's the way it has to be, we can talk with Jeff and Jesse about modifying it that way, but is that what?
No, I just,
I mean, I think if you just show both scores, the upper and the lower score would, and then that clarifies when you go to, the COG council that, hey, there's something
Could
here.
we do that? Could
If
we
we-
do 2 score sheets, one under one
We could-
scenario?
You could just
one
do like
under
a
another?
slash, like a 6/0.
Yeah,
where
we could work on a way to illustrate that.
Yeah, we could try to do.
At least, and I think it still ranks at the highest, because it still meets that, unless it only goes by itself, and that's what you can clarify. To me, that makes the most sense, at least it shows both of those, this discussion out there has happened.
I'm not saying to do this because it backfired on Nibley, but you could also withdraw one of them, and it's happened right at the COG voting meeting, ranking meeting and everything. It's good practice sometimes. It can bite you in the tail.
Yeah, it does. Again, we've seen them more like, I think, we've seen a number of them get phased. Again, we had Nibblers where it was really long. We had Logan's where they did the bridge, and it's kind of like, you really needed both. It's hard to split that to each have independent utility, but it does say, hey, when it's possible, so we don't have, hey, we've got the right of way for this piece, but there's unknown right of way for 5 blocks. We don't want to build a piece, and then all those people say, no way, no how, and then that's 5 years to make connections, or there's issues with, we want to be able that road to be used to its fullest extent as soon as possible.
Gotcha. So like, my last question, I'll shut up after this. Are any of these requesting funds from CMP?
No, because we've not opened it up. There's no money. You can go ahead and request on the wall.
Okay.
I mean, we did that one batch of the high priority projects, and that's the other thing.
None of these are on that list?
There's what was funded out of the CMPO.
So,
Like the county got
It
like,
didn't come out as a general application, right?
yeah,
It just had
we did
limited who could apply.
so initially it gave the board 4 options. We could open it up to all applicants, anything's fair game, or we have what we call momentum projects. These were projects that were in the hopper, and that was left. I mean, 200 East was on there, but they kind of said, no, we're gonna go after with COG.
Our two projects were on there, we put both of them off the list, CMP.
So which one got, I
So-
sorry, just which
so
one got
on
funded?
these,
can't remember the exact
the
amount.
county for our 1200 East, we have like $50,000 for some right of way.
That's on the north end to Smithfield.
The county gets 50
There
grand.
was 50,000 that went to that, and then there was
That
some
was for
money
design.
or right of way, and then I think there was some to go towards Hyde Park for design and some right of way purchase through that corridor up into Smithfield.
So
It was for the
how much
bigger
did I
picture.
get out of CMP money?
It's over $1 million. I can't remember. I think it was, I have to look.
Was that funding A or B?
Both and the phase into,
And
and the
to
phase into
Smithfield.
Smithfield.
So 1.7.
And Hyde Park and
out of
Smithfield, we've got to
CMP for
kind
that.
of work out what
was a
of that right.
Joint venture between us, Cache County, and Smithfield, the 3 of us are kind of working together on
Sure.
the engineering property
So that's fine,
acquisition.
but that's where the CMPO money.
And then they went to the county got like $1 million for 4,400 south for the South Valley connector through that portion.
You know what that is, east-west.
Between 165, yeah, just north, between Hiram and Nibley to go between 165 and 8991, there's like $1 million-ish.
Was that design
and
right of way and start tying that down there.
So the CMPO just said, these are projects we've all supported. We're just gonna try to juice them as much as we can, and that's where those. But that's kind of have to be kind of accounted for, which I don't know that it is necessarily, and what portion of that is going to these. Does that make sense? I don't know that we fully resolved that.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense, but we'll just have to talk about it, figure out how you want us to show that.
Yeah, and essentially how the CMPO would see it is the three of you or Matt get together and kind of say, okay, when we know the one piece is doing that study to analyze the alignment change, and then from there, is it what level of design is done where, and how is that right of way, strategically used between that quote. We kind of have you work it out, and then whatever that amount comes in this phase is what would be reflected. But we just want to juice the project, so I think that kind of needs to be worked out between the county, Smithfield, Hyde Park. If that makes sense. Hyde Park's the lead on it.
And things going the way they are, the county might not even be part of the project soon. Pretty much every property owner we've talked to that's in the county has asked us, how do we annex in Hyde Park? So,
I don't think the county would have any.
I would
argument with that.
say, just take the roads next to it, we probably don't have it. We don't like half roads, they're okay.
This is a lot to digest. Any other, just.
No, yeah, there's, again, we had it scheduled till 5, but I don't think anyone will complain about leaving early, but last time this was long, it took, I don't think we really even wrapped up in that meeting, so we tried to give ourselves a little extra time this time so that there was time, people could voice their opinions, thoughts.
We pushed out stuff early. We blew it last year. Didn't give you a lot of time to chew on it, but hopefully this time you have more time to chew. And again, the executive committee is the one that approves the funding run. And staff and jurisdictional staff are inputs to that, turning the crank on it and giving them recommendations. That makes sense.
Didn't you want to finalize the comment sheet?
Ideally, if you have comments about other projects, Wednesday, that gives a day or two or into Monday for the other jurisdictions to respond to those in COG staff. So if we have to chase it last year, some of those came right at the last minute. So those that got hard copies, we just have to re-hand them out in the meeting. But next Tuesday is my day to get them. I need to get the mailings out. So ideally that would be as complete as possible, but if there's something else, we can add it.
I'll just say this, that with going to 90%, the plan quality is way better. It's a lot easier to review.
Well, we went from 90 to 30.
Well, no,
But we raised
these plans are just having that checklist, I guess. I think
yeah, we
that's
try to
probably
spell
the
things
better
out,
method.
and again, some were better than others, but it's hard to say, oh, you didn't put this one thing, you're out of here or something.
It's a lot
So
better than in the past. It was good quality is what I'm seeing, so.
So do you want, I just noticed on the last one, there were comments, do you want us to respond by next Tuesday too?
yes, so I was gonna send out an email and start.
Okay.
By Friday, if you haven't commented, you're gonna start getting bombarded with email.
Comment to the comment or versus?
Your response, by responses, if those aren't in there by Friday morning, you're gonna get some email, maybe a phone call. This is, again, by Tuesday morning, I'll need those so that I can go out in the, so.
Keep in mind, we're meeting with the COG executive
On
committee on Thursday. So this log is like kind of full game. You can respond to technical issues. Hey, is this drainage design big enough? Whatever you want to do. Scoring things though, we probably need.
if you have other concerns with this, like ideally like tomorrow or before lunch on Wednesday.
I mean, we'll take what we learned here and we'll convey it. We'll make the video available to them. But I guess what I'm saying is in terms of what you comment on, come the scoring part of this come Thursday is gonna shut down.
I do, yeah, I'll like the sooner the better. If you have questions on scoring or comments, other comments or something.
So just, what does the technical manual ask or say about, future projected? And is there a 5-year, 10-year, 20-year? I can't remember if it wasn't.
For future,
Yeah,
ideally, it's when that road would open.
it's when that road would open, it's with the projected.
Yes.
It's supposed to be on the application, I guess.
Well, what we say is for projects that exist, we want actual counts.
Correct.
And then for new roads that don't exist, we've kind of just left it wide open to say, if you want to do an analysis, and it has to be something that sells, to say, yeah, we analyze this. I mean, unfortunately, the CMPO travel model, particularly now, is not up to snuff to be the determinant to say, yeah, this is, because it's inconsistent on what roads are in there and even on the modeling performance on some roads. So we just say, if it's a new road, if you want to turn your crank on an L, now this would have been months ago when you're developing an application, try to chase those points and say, you know, we think this road is gonna be this. And we had Hyde Park project did that, right?
High Park, Logan did it for 400 north, but I think there's 600 west was still higher. Richmond did it. So again, it's kind of out there. Usually there's some other counts to kind of help give some projections of what those would be, some type of analysis to try to make a guess. Again, we haven't held the bar like super, super high, but you can't just pick a number out of thin air and just say, I think it's this because it looks like a nice number. We want to try to push them down some documentation, some reason for the number that they've got to, they came up with.
Some of the projects, the rural areas, you know, they're not likely to get enough volumes under a reasonable analysis to even chase those points. So there's really no use in doing it. But in the urban, you know, in some cases there are, but we need a defensible analysis.
I like Smithfield's 19. ADT of 19.
I think that's what was typed into your application, but
Yeah, it was.
What did I type in wrong?
No,
you're good.
the ADT of the new road, 19.
Oh. I don't think,
That's
You didn't get any points for that.
yeah,
That's all you can be sure about though, right?
yeah.
I like these.
I can justify that.
Be honest.
I
I like your honesty. She has.
If there's no other comments, we'll let you.
Sounds good. Thank
get
you.
on. So,
Thank you.
thank you guys for, we know it's a time commitment out of your guys' day, but we appreciate the discussion, the catching our conversation. So thank you.
Just real quick. Is it widening? Is it a true lane, as a turn lane, count as a widening of the lane?
Say that again.
A turn lane, so if I'm going from a 2-lane configuration to a 3, is that not an adding of a lane?
Well,